And let's just look at how well the country is doing in achieving those SDGs. I'm now being joined by the program manager at the UNEP inquiry within the UN office in Geneva, Mr. Daniel Akimade Emejulu. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you, Joma.
All right, so this report is due to be out. Just what are some of the most important details that you need to tell us quickly?
Thank you. Well, as you heard in your report, Nigeria is only 12 years away from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that were set in 2015. This is going to require financing. How do you pay for healthcare? How do you pay for infrastructure? How do you pay for housing? How do you eradicate poverty? Nigeria, in this report, has estimated need of $90 billion between now and 2030 to achieve its development goals on all 17 frontiers. However, the current financial flows to Nigeria, we've estimated to be about $10 billion. This shows that there's a significant gap in terms of the shortfall, and the investment needed is going to need to increase by several orders of magnitude, about 9 to be precise.
Yeah.
This report then looks at private sector as a potential financier of some of those goals and specific elements within the finance sector, such as institutional investors and beyond.
So what are the low-hanging fruits? Because, you know, when you look at 2030 and the projection,
Sure.
It's always like something so in the distant future,
Sure.
and that people don't actually see the short-term benefit of it beyond what is put down on paper. So what are some of those?
Sure. So Nigeria has recently joined a very exclusive club of countries that have launched green bonds. Sovereign green bonds are very similar to traditional vanilla bonds. However, the use of the proceeds from those bonds go purely towards sustainable initiatives. This is a way of reallocating capital from polluting and environmentally adverse effects towards initiatives that are better for the environment and promote sustainable development goals.
So what specific areas do you think are critical to Nigeria? I know you've talked about healthcare and all, but what specific areas, I mean, should we look at when we look at this document? Is it something I keep saying, so in the future? So what is in it for us?
The infrastructure gap in Nigeria is huge, as well as the healthcare and education needs. It's estimated that about 1 billion is lost every year to health tourism in the healthcare sector. So there's need to invest in hospitals, there's need to invest in schools. By the year 2030, Nigeria is supposed to have over 250 million people as a population, potentially more. So healthcare and education needs are going to be highly important, as well as the needs for infrastructure to ensure a sustainable transportation system, connectivity to the rest of the world, and to ensure that investments coming to Nigeria are sustainable. So it's the key basics that I think we're aware about, but it's raising opportunities to finance these initiatives.
And in terms of the fears of whether or not we're going to reach these goals by 2030, as you heard Mrs. Adefudure say, how difficult will it be?
I think the private sector is going to play a very important role, especially the finance sector. I think that there are opportunities for institutional investors, for pension funds, and for the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, who can take a longer-term view on investments. When you look at banks, and banks account for about 70 to 80% of Nigeria's total financial assets, their lending to projects is short-term in nature. However, institutional investors and pension funds can take a longer-term view, and therefore they can look at projects that will require a 20-year tenure and begin to fund sustainable goals. So I think those sorts of interventions will be very key. And currently, they're not investing in as much sustainable asset classes as they could. But if we can reallocate capital away from polluting sources to these sources, I think then these low-hanging fruits and these victories are more attainable.
And obviously, we're coming into an election year, and I always ask the question whether our politics is of a concern to you in the job you do, and whether that will affect the outcome of the polls will affect what you're trying to achieve at the UN.
I think stability is key in every economic context and every country context. I think that investors who want to buy a government's bond will look at the stability of the government, they will look at the credit rating of the government, and they will look at the way in which a government honors its commitments year in, year out. So if we have clear transitions in any country context, and if we have government commitments being honored, you're allowing investors to get behind a green bond you issue if it's a sovereign. And we're also looking at corporations and subnational governments issuing green bonds as well to scale this effect.
All right, thank you so very much. The program manager at UNEP, Mr. Daniel Akimade Emejulu.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thank you,